Today our guest is Cecil Murphey. Cecil Murphey.
At least 50% of people over age 85 will develop some form of dementia.
Welcome to Heritage of Truth. Today our guest is Cecil Murphey. Cecil Murphey. He is the author of more than 120 books. You are prolific.
Yes, that's a good word.
He penned the book Gifted Hands and 90 Minutes in Heaven. And what are a few of your others?
Oh, I did Franklin Graham's autobiography called Rebel with a Cause. I have a book that's doing fairly well called When a Man You Love Was Abused. What I'm doing now is a whole series of gift books. This is the 4th or 5th one in the series. Writing on topics where people are hurting.
Yes, and you do that so well. This one is called When Someone You Love No Longer Remembers, and boy can I relate to that. My dad is 90 years old, and he oftentimes no longer remembers. He has dementia, and it's a painful thing to watch. This was a brilliant man.
Absolutely. Well, statistically, at least 50% of people over age 85 will develop some form of dementia.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the aging process for many people.
Okay. Well, one of the denials that caregivers use to avoid facing the truth is they'll say, well, she or he is just a little bit forgetful.
Oh, yes.
What are some other...
Well, that's an easy one. Or they'll say just something like, oh, he's okay, or he gets confused. You know, it's really tends to be a form of denial.
Mm-hmm.
Denial because for many people there's a stigma. I don't know why, but there's a stigma like something terrible about dementia. Because it's really a memory impairment. That's just a disease. Mm-hmm. But there's a sense of shame.
Yes, I noticed that.
It's in our family. Mm-hmm. So they'll have all kinds of ways of disguising it. But part of, and that really always happens in the beginning. It's sort of like, here's the truth. Now it takes 10 minutes or 10 weeks for it to sink in and become a reality.
Well, why do you think caregivers and families deny or cover up dementia? Is it because of that shame?
Well, the shame, the stigma, it's like, it falls into the kind of category of mental illness. It's a physical impairment, but, there's something we're still ashamed of mental illness. And it's like if they have a broken leg or they have to have a heart transplant. Yeah, people talk about that readily. But dementia, there are a few things they don't talk about readily because I think there is the stigma.
And that's so unfair. It's so unfair, especially to the person with dementia.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I wrote this book. The other one is every year they diagnose about 5.3 million people with dementia. Now, let me explain. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, and nobody can truthfully say a person has Alzheimer's except by autopsy.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but there are enough signs and indications. See, there's so many forms of dementia. Mm-hmm. Let me try another word. Dementia is a new word for senility. So can you imagine the emotional baggage with senility? Oh, he's just senile. See, hear that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hear how negative that is? Like that's mental illness. Dementia was supposed to be kind of like, it's a euphemism. There was a kind of a positive form, but there's no positive form. It's memory impairment. Yes. So if we say memory impairment, maybe that's a better way of saying. All I know is that there are people who still cover it up. Yes. Well, as long as they can.
Yes. Yes. Well, how do you respond when someone asks, how did my loved one get AD, or she doesn't deserve this?
Well, number one, who deserves it? Either everybody or nobody. You know, it's not based on deserving. Somehow we get this idea that, you know, it's an old thing. It actually comes from the Old Testament. The Old Testament, they really believed that if you got physically sick, it was because of some sin or evil you had done, and God was repaying you for it. Well, we don't really go think that today, but there's still this stigma, like, what did I do? Or the one I hear a lot is, but she was such a good person. She doesn't deserve, you know, it doesn't work that way. The sun shines on the good and the bad, the rain falls on the good and the bad. It isn't a question of deserving. It's really a way of saying, I think, whether we're conscious of it or not, is how do I deal with this? How do I cope with this? I don't know what to do. So you ask those kinds of questions like, why did she get it? What did she do to deserve it? And you know what? Even if they knew the answer, it wouldn't change anything.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. Well, one of the things that I've noticed with my dad is that a lot of people don't understand the confusion that he's living in, and sometimes they'll react impatiently, or they'll try to hide that he's not making sense or whatever, somewhat to protect him. But there are things that we can do to help them through that. You stress the power of touch.
Exactly where I was going to go.
Yes.
See, if you're a caregiver, one of your responsibilities is to prepare your visitors. And you talk very as frankly as you can. Say, look, you may not understand everything he says. That's okay. Be patient with him. And if he uses makes some crazy statement, you either say, I'm sorry, I don't understand, or just look at him and say, please repeat it. Sometimes they know they're using crazy words, so most of the time they don't. What I would suggest you do is tell your visitors, come and be calm. Calm is the key. If you get agitated, that person will generally become agitated. If you're soft and quiet, you will help calm down the person with dementia. And the other thing, a couple other things I would say is call that person by name. And another thing is when they come in and say, hey, my name's Jeanne. And if he says, who are you? You just say, my name is Jeanne. And if he says, do I know you? Which they don't usually do it. But if they say, do I know you? Just say, my name is Jeanne, you know me. It's just as simple an answer as you can. See, what you don't want is to add confusion. They're already confused. And the other thing I think would help caregivers is to remind themselves, he or she will never get better. That's the hard thing. This is a disease that is progressive. And if they're forgetful now, that's only the beginning. Another thing is, you know, anybody with dementia, they now know there are certain times of day when they're better than other times. So one of the suggestions is that I give them is find out when a person is normally at his or her best. And common, this isn't true with everybody, but common thing is what I call sundowning. Have you heard this term?
Yes.
Okay, so for the people who don't know, sundowning is when about sundown, there's something, we don't know if it's a physical reaction to the environment or what, but they tend to get very agitated or upset, so you don't want to...
I've observed that.
I'm sorry?
I've observed that,
Yeah,
yes.
and that's very common, not everybody, but it's very common. So figure out the best time of day, and then invite them, and you say, look, call just before you come. I want to make sure he or she is feeling okay, and not maybe come another day. But one other thing, just because the person has dementia, encourage your friends to come anyway. You do it for your loved one and also for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have noticed that when we have like relatives come from out of town, or even when I come from half an hour away, my dad rises rises to the occasion, and it's almost as if his memory returns a little bit during those times.
That's very common. Let me give you an example. There's a pastor's wife who had, they assumed it was Alzheimer's. She had not recognized anybody for weeks. We were at a funeral. I followed her husband as the pastor. And there was a woman named Betty Freeman. It was her husband who died. And afterwards, Betty and I were walking together. We walked by, the woman's name is Janet, walked by Janet, and just blank. You know, there's a blankness that, you know, so evident. But she looked at Betty and she said, Betty, you're Betty. And her husband started crying. He said, this is the first time she's recognized anybody in weeks. So it happens once in a while, particularly people who were important to them in some way.
Yes, exactly. Like my dad still knows I'm his oldest daughter.
Yeah, well, he won't always.
I know that.
And you're very musical. And so one of the things that will help you, probably figured this out already, but music is one of the things that stays with people the longest. My mother was never diagnosed. She died of a heart attack, but she was moving towards senility of some form, dementia. So when I visited, she started getting a little agitated. I'd sing some of her old songs. There's a song that I heard there called Farther Along, and I used to sing that to her, and somehow that calmed her.
Yes. Well, I had an aunt who was in a nursing home, and she had dementia, and I went to visit her, and she couldn't talk, but I would sing hymns to her, and it was like I could see recognition, and she would go like this.
Very, very common.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's a hospice chaplain, and he says that he often will go, he visits them in their home as well as in institutions, and he said sometimes people who haven't spoken for a week, he'll start singing. And
Sing with them?
Yeah, and sometimes they'll join him, or the best one. He starts saying, Jesus loves me, and the woman, when he finished, the woman smiled, she said, Jesus loves me, I know.
Great.
So there are some subterranean levels that we don't understand, and on some level they get it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I noticed that about music many years ago, and so I appreciate your mentioning that. You offer several suggestions for communicating with your loved one. Can you tell us a few of those?
You know, you got to think of it this way. They have lost and are losing their reasoning power, so you don't want to throw things at them like heavy, decision making. See, you may be the child, but you're also now the parent. So you've got to make decisions. And it sounds cruel to say it this way, but if you could think of this person as elderly or as a young child, so you have to talk in that kind of simple language. But there are two things that I think that work. One is to touch their hand. If it's somebody you're close to, their baby, there's something about skin against skin that is so encouraging. Or a hug. I'm amazed at people who respond to touch. Even people who are not normally would feely kind of people. And the other one is the eye contact.
Yes.
And this is one thing you might say to your visitors. When you come into the room and you see her sitting there, make eye contact. Don't be looking around. Keep your eyes on this person as much as you can. Yeah, just you and I, Preston, you're rational, I'm rational, but there's something about eye contact that invites intimacy.
Yes.
That's a normal thing. So now think about it. If here I am and I'm the normal, and you have some form of dementia, there's still something magnetic, magical, whatever you want to call it.
Because the eyes are the window of the soul.
That's right.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that survives till near the end. Even when they don't understand the words, there's something about that. And one of the things, don't get too close. Get close, but this is a good space. But they've got to have that private space, whether they're aware of it or not. And I think sometimes just holding a person's hand, it's amazing. We had an elderly relative, and when she'd get really agitated, I found the thing that worked best is, her name was Edith, and I would just say, okay, Edith, and I would just take her hand, squeeze her hand, and then she'd smile at me, and that would be the end of it.
Well, we are out of time. I wish we had longer to talk. You talk in your book, too, about what caregivers need to do for themselves, don't you?
Yes, the main thing is take care of yourself. Find ways to take care. This is, if somebody has dementia, this is a long-term job.
Yes.
3 years, 5 years, 15 years is not that unusual. So
Yeah.
you want to take care of yourself and ask for help. And even if you don't get it, ask and keep asking. Find someone. There are daycare centers that will take Alzheimer's patients during the day, or if necessary, whatever you can do, find ways to get out of the house.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for writing this book. Thank you for all that you do in your writing, and most people don't know, but you are a blessing to the publishing industry in many ways, and I just want to thank you for your leadership and all that you've done for so many people.
God bless you.
And for being our guest.
For believers to live